Hello and welcome everybody to our NBA Trade Zone podcast where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, future. Hi guys, my name is Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today we will be recapping some of the recent trades that have happened in the past week. We will start with the biggest one, where Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green have been sent to the Toronto Raptors for DeMar DeRozan, Jacob Poeltl, and next year's first round draft pick that is top 20 protected. We're going to discuss how we feel about this trade, who are the winners and losers, and just overall thoughts. So, Danny, would you want to start discussing this trade?
Yes, sure. So I think the biggest winner in this trade is Greg Popovich. Essentially, he gets what he wanted out of a Kawhi Leonard trade. Now, I'm sure he didn't want to trade Kawhi Leonard, but he gets exactly what he wanted. He gets an all-star in return, he gets a young player, and he gets a draft pick. Now, I'm sure he wanted multiple draft picks, would have liked another young player. However, in DeMar DeRozan, he gets exactly what he wanted, which was an all-star coming onto a team that won 47 games. Essentially coming onto a team for nothing because Kawhi Leonard barely played last year. So this should definitely confirm that the Spurs should win at least another 50 games next year, make it to the playoffs, and compete in the playoffs. So how do you feel his fit? How do you think DeMar DeRozan fits in with the team?
Yeah, I mean, DeMar DeRozan is a good player, and I think one of the things that they needed last year was scoring, playmaking, and I think DeMar DeRozan is gonna do that. I have full faith in Coach Popovich to be able to fit him in well, put him, make him use his strengths, get him, to the spots where he can be successful. So I have no worries there. I do think he's gonna improve the Spurs' win total. I think his defense is going to improve in San Antonio just because it's a team-oriented defense. So, Coach Popovich got exactly what he wanted. He got somebody who was, I believe, third All-NBA. So, when it comes to looking at their team last year without Kawhi, this is a definite improvement. I know there's been a lot of criticism about DeMar DeRozan not being a three-point shooter, and the Spurs being the team that shoots the most two-pointers, or is like fourth statistically in shooting two-pointers, and that this is just gonna make it worse. But Coach Popovich has never relied heavily on three. He's always used it in moments where they need to. So I don't think that's something that's gonna make the Spurs a bad team, is that DeMar DeRozan can't shoot the three.
Yeah, and it really can't make it worse because they didn't shoot a lot of threes last year. So I definitely don't see it making it worse. There's also been a lot of reports about DeMar DeRozan being upset, and I think that was taken out of context. I think he was more upset at the Toronto Raptors and not coming to have to play for the Spurs. I think most people would like to come play for the Spurs and for Greg Popovich. Really, I think the results speak for themselves. Everyone sees what Greg Popovich does as a coach, how he really gets the most out of his players. So I think the fact that DeMar DeRozan was upset was definitely not about him having to come play for the Spurs. It was more about the fact that he was told one thing by the Toronto Raptors, or at least he felt he was told one thing, and then another thing happened. And he's really been with the Raptors for his whole career, so he feels he really has a soft spot for the team. He really did not want to leave. However, I think coming to the Spurs is going to really... I think once he starts playing for the Spurs, he's going to start feeling that same type of loyalty and be really happy that he's there and playing under Greg Popovich, who's one of the best coaches of all time.
Yeah, like you said, he was upset, but he was upset at Toronto. He never had any difficulties with the Spurs. I believe, he's an emotional guy, so he was in love with Toronto, and Toronto loved him back. But he's going to go into, in my opinion, into a better situation. That's why I considered him one of the winners. And I know it looks like, he's upset right now and he doesn't want to, he would rather stay in Toronto. But I think at the end, he's going to go into San Antonio, right? He's going to be playing more in the United States, so he's not going to be in Canada. He's going to be in Texas, and compare how much you pay in taxes in Canada to how much you're going to pay in San Antonio, he's going to save a lot more money this year just by doing that and for the next 2 years. I think he's going to be in a good situation with a lot of veterans. He's going to be able to compete more. I mean, I know that the Toronto Raptors were successful regular season team, but then when it came to the playoffs, they lost every year almost. It's LeBron pretty quickly, pretty easily. So I think he's going to be more able to compete with San Antonio. He's going to be around a more playoff culture, or at least for the next few years. And I think overall he's going to be happy. He's going to be closer to LA, which is his hometown. So I think at the end he's one of the winners of this trade. He's going to be able to lead a team, lead a pretty talented team, and see what happens from there.
Yeah, I agree that he wins in this situation as well. Toronto was a good regular season team last year and probably would have been a good regular season team this year with him there. However, having to compete with the Celtics would have been very difficult. Having to compete with Philadelphia would have been difficult as well. Now, he's not going to have an easier time competing in the Western Conference. However, he's going to have a better team to compete with. And I believe my opinion and yours, because of the fact that they have a better coach there, and especially now with Toronto having a first-year coach, they have a better coach there and they have a better culture there in general, a culture of winning. And now he really gets to develop around LaMarcus Aldridge, develop around some of those younger players, and really see what they could do there as a team. And Toronto seemed to be more on, maybe not a decline, but they were deciding about a transitional period because they were deciding whether to rebuild, whether to continue trying to win around DeRozan and Lowry. They have a lot of good young players there and a couple of good all-stars. So it was really a weird phase for them. And now he gets to go into a situation where he knows that there's no rebuild coming, that he knows that he's going to be competing over the remainder of his contract because of the fact that Greg Popovich refuses to rebuild.
Yeah. So one of the other winners I would say in this trade would be the Toronto Raptors. I think this is one of those rare trades where both teams are, at least for now, the winners. Now, obviously, there's a big, asterisk by this because if Kawhi walks away next year, you did lose DeMar DeRozan and you didn't get any assets back. But I do believe that as the Toronto Raptors, you have to take this gamble. And I think it probably propels you to the number 2 team right now in Toronto. In the East, as long as Kawhi Leonard is healthy. I really think that a defense of Kyle Lowry, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, Siakam, and OG Anunoby is a real good defense. Now, I'm not saying that's the starters, but I think that's a really good defense, even with Serge Ibaka, who's also another good defensive player. I think they're going to be a good team, and I think they're going to be better. They're going to be better than next year. So I do believe that this trade is definitely worth it for the Raptors because they're not giving up too much of their young talent. They didn't give up Anunoby and they didn't give up Siakam. So they able to get one of the 3 best players in the league when he's healthy. And when you get a chance to do that, you do that. And you have a whole year to be able to persuade him to stay in Toronto. So I think what the Raptors did here is worth the gamble. There are reports now that some people close to Kawhi Leonard's team are saying, he might stay in Toronto. I mean, I don't know how realistic those are, but I do think that if you're Toronto, you do to take this gamble. And if not, you just kind of rebuild and build around your young talent.
Yeah, and I think as for the reports, actually, I wanted to bring that up too because I just think the media takes so many things out of context. Like the day of the trade, the first report that came out almost immediately after the trade was that Kawhi Leonard was so disappointed he may sit out the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And literally probably about 12 hours later, there was a report that came out that Kawhi Leonard is really building up to the idea of playing for the Raptors, which I think was absolutely something had to be fake there. I mean, there's no way that he changed his mind so quickly after 12 hours. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't want to play there. In fact, I feel that Toronto has a good chance of re-signing him next year mainly because of the financial situation of it. I mean, with this trade for Kawhi Leonard, this assures now Toronto can't re-sign him for the Supermax because you could only re-sign for the Supermax with the original team that you were playing for. However, Toronto will have the ability to offer Kawhi Leonard a fifth year in his contract, and his contract will be able to increase by 8% every year with Toronto as compared to 5% if he were to sign with the Clippers or the Lakers. So I really find it hard for, I think, players really, when it really comes down to it and they see that offer on the table, that's when it gets hard for them to turn down that money. Now, a lot of them might consider going to another team, switching cities, and letting that money on the table. But when that offer is in front of you, that's when it becomes the hardest to do. And also, Toronto, I think, does have a real good situation there. Now, yeah, you're going to be competing with Philadelphia and Cleveland Philadelphia and Boston over the next 10 years. But I do think they have a nice mix of veterans and young players to really build around. I don't think it's as bad as some people think it is. And Kawhi Leonard might really consider staying there, especially after playing there for a year. Now, what really happens is still obviously we're gonna have to wait and see to be told. Another reason why I believe Toronto's a winner here is, of course, they could, and I don't think they will, but they could always swap Kawhi Leonard at the trade deadline. Now, it's going to be hard for them to do so, and the reason why I don't see them doing it is because two reasons really. Now, one, if Kawhi Leonard is having himself a great year, and Toronto, obviously, if he's having himself a great year, we have reason to believe that Toronto would be winning, then there's no reason for them to trade him, because now they have a opportunity to go to the championship, and really, you don't pass up an opportunity to go to a championship, to the NBA Finals, because of the money that you earn. Now, if he is having himself a bad year, still the injuries are still controlling him, and the team is losing. Now that makes it that much harder to trade him. And what's even worse is that teams like the Lakers probably won't be willing to give up many assets for him. They probably wouldn't be willing to give up Brandon Ingram in this situation, when they know he's becoming a free agent and they will have a chance to sign him in the offseason. So really, now that just another opportunity for Toronto here if they choose to go that path. If he's having himself a great year but is still upset, demands that trade, now all of a sudden you could be like, hey, Lakers, give us Brandon Ingram, we'll give you Kawhi Leonard, and all of a sudden they have another young player for themselves to replace DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like Lakers were not even willing to give up Ingram in any deal. But I will just point out that I don't know how much money actually does matter for Kawhi. He's one of those weird players that it does seem like money might not be the biggest issue or biggest motivating factor for him to stay. I mean, he turned down a lot of money in San Antonio, right? He turned down that Jordan deal with the shoes that he thinks he's worth more, but I don't know if he's going to get more, right? Because he doesn't have probably a personality to be the main guy in a deal like that. So I don't know how much of the money matters, but I do think Toronto is a team that he'll consider staying for, especially if he's happy there, if he's happy with the organization, he'll enjoy playing there, and maybe he'll stay. And then if you're Toronto, you do that. You take that risk, you take that gamble.
Yeah, and that's the thing though with the shoe deal especially. Now, I mean, with everything that's gone on in the last couple of months surrounding Kawhi Leonard, he doesn't have that same type of reputation anymore that he had. He's not looked upon as a role model as much as he was when he was an extremely quiet character, didn't speak much, and really nobody know. The good thing, real reason why I like Kawhi Leonard is he hasn't really said much or spoken much about any of this. He's let his camp handle it. And usually that's not how we want to see our NBA players, but I enjoy the fact that he is extremely quiet and that he doesn't let everything that's said about him affect him in a negative way in terms of him feeling that he needs to speak up. No, he continues to be his own person. Now, the problem is the shoe companies will probably not see it that way. They want some